How are you doing, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and in today's episode, I'll be chatting through 5 players at the wide receiver position that I view as potential fantasy football league winners here throughout the next 5 weeks or so, depending on how long your particular season is. Some people will be ending in the regularly slated Week 17 contest. Others will push their leagues out to Week 18. So there's a lot at stake here in the next month plus or so. We've got to check out our players here and see which of them can contribute in the highest ways to our lineups down the stretch here. And again, we'll be chatting through 5 of those wide receivers in today's episode, which starts right now. All right, in today's episode, the name of the game is going to be upside. There's a lot of potential with these players, but at the end of the day, nothing is really guaranteed. There are holes and imperfections in each one of these fantasy football players' outlooks, but what we're looking for here is players that can get hot at the right times or are currently getting hot at the right time, and that starts here with Christian Watson, our first potential league-winning wide receiver. Now, the absolute perfect role for me to have Christian Watson playing on your fantasy football teams is either a wide receiver 3 or flex level lineup situation, because it gives you the flexibility of surviving kind of a bust performance from him if he's only your 3rd level producer at that spot, but it also gives you the upside to win your potential matchup with an eruption like we've seen the last 3 games from him with tremendous scoring output. So for Watson, everyone knows it's been basically posted a million times and repeated ad nauseum the last 3 weeks. He's got 6 touchdowns over that span of time and has clearly, in my eyes, asserted himself as the wide receiver to own in this Packers offense. Now, there is some conversations about the quarterback position, who's going to be playing that going forward here. The way I look at it is that either you've got Aaron Rodgers, a 4-time NFL MVP, a future Hall of Famer, a guy who has been spinning him the football and contributing points to Watson in lineups the last couple of games here, or you've got Jordan Love, who immediately came in and threw him a pass that he took 66 yards to the house and scored a touchdown with, and has actually been working a lot with this receiver group at practice, because if you didn't know this, Love has been playing Wednesday practice as the team's quarterback 1 for weeks now, as Rodgers, actually since week 5, as Aaron's been dealing with that was an avulsion of his thumb or whatever, which is like his torn ligament slash broken bone. So that just sounds insanely painful. But regardless here, Christian Watson, with the size he has, the lightning quick speed, there's so much big play potential here. Rodgers just went on Pat McAfee, not that this matters too much, but it does show that he's got confidence and faith in Christian Watson and what he's been doing here as of late. He talked about him as a reliable, consistent, big play target for this offense, and that's exactly what he is. He's not going to walk out here and get 10 targets every week and catch 8 of them and have 125 yards. That's not necessarily who he is right now. Right now, Christian Watson's the guy that's going to catch a crossing route like we saw against Philadelphia on Sunday night, catch it, take it to the house, and score you some quick, easy, and cheap points. And for those of you in leagues where you've got bonuses for big plays, all the better, because he is absolutely someone that predicates himself on making the most of opportunities like that. So for Christian Watson here, a whole lot of ceiling potential for you going forward. Amari Cooper, I've kind of tipped my hand here and given this one away in trade episodes as of late, but for Cooper, there is so much that I like potentially about him here. He is having himself a fantastic season, and I really think that this Cleveland offense is the perfect fit for him. Now, I wish I had continued my bullish takes on Amari Cooper throughout the summer, because I started out post-Watson trade rumor, or post-trade news rather, super hot and bullish on Amari Cooper's fantasy value for this team. And then once the reports of the 12-game suspension came out, his ADP tanked, and so did ultimately my confidence in him with Jacoby Brissett. Thankfully, the shares that I had picked up suspension news continued to just go great for me throughout this season. He's been incredibly dependable in his floor. It hasn't been perfect, but it's been a lot better than what I expected. And now things hopefully get better here with the insertion of Deshaun down the stretch, where the matchups look very, very good for Amari Cooper and what he provides for this offense. So basically what this is an excellent boundary / perimeter route running threat. He's not necessarily somebody that runs the entire route tree, like the slot type tree, very well. But what he does is get vertical, and he has speed and obviously big playmaking ability. And when you've got an offensive line that provides the opportunity for deep shots in a run game that sucks up the box players and obviously distracts them in terms of the play action pass game, you get a whole lot of opportunities and potential for big plays. Now, Deshaun obviously is improved quarterback play, so hopefully that even boosts his floor further and contributes to that ceiling as well. But for me, I am kind of expecting a down week here in Week 13. He's got Houston this week. It's a revenge game for both the Texans and Deshaun. And at the end of the day, I do think that a guy who hasn't played football for 700 days is going to have some rust. Now, I take that back. He did play in the preseason technically in limited fashion, but aside from, the last 3 months plus, that hasn't been the case. So for Deshaun, you're hoping to see things by Week 15, round 1 of the playoffs, really start to take off here. And if that's the case, I think Amari Cooper is looking very good here. The schedule includes, like I said, that Week 13 matchup against Houston, and then a whole lot of green here: Baltimore, New Orleans, at Washington, and at Pittsburgh. All fantastic chances for him here. JuJu Smith-Schuster, a name that has kind of been left to the wayside. There's been a lot going on. They brought in Kadarius Toney, and then JuJu gets absolutely smoked in the middle of his hot streak against Jacksonville. He's in concussion protocol, and in back-to-back games as a result of that injury and then being on a pitch count the following week back, he's had a below 40% snap count percentage in his last 2 games, which, again, I don't think is indicative of JuJu Smith-Schuster, the player. It's not even an opinion, really. It's just not indicative of him and his role in this offense, because he was literally just breaking out pre-concussion and head issue he suffered again against Jacksonville in that game. So, for JuJu here, this is all about the usage. The matchups on paper are incredibly difficult for the Kansas City pass catching core in terms of the amount of points they've allowed to opposing fantasy receivers. But JuJu isn't your typical wide receiver. What he is here is a run after a catch monster in this offense that's running a lot of underneath routes. And what I love to see is that Mahomes has started throwing him some back shoulder fade plays as well, meaning you don't necessarily have to separate yourself from the defender to actually pick up the yardage and complete the catch. So I think that his role in this offense has really become a perfect encapsulation of who JuJu the player is. And we saw it took him a bit of time to pick up the playbook and really get comfortable here in this new offense. After all, he had spent his first 5 seasons as a Pittsburgh Steeler, but now he's picking things up here. Again, pre-injury, he had just put up 2 of his best games of the entire season, and he's a top wide receiver in a Mahomes-led offense. Kadarius Toney is also nicked up right now as well. Kadarius, I think, may be a more talented, physically gifted athlete, but for this season and the remainder of the year, JuJu to me is the wide receiver to own for this offense. So there's a lot to like here. JuJu hopefully will continue to see his targets go up around that 8 target per game marker. I think he'll continue to be more effective with those targets than he was early in the season, and hopefully find himself heading into the end zone and getting some big plays after the catch down the stretch here. Diontae Johnson, also George Pickens here. I can't put up 2 guys on the screen at once, unfortunately. But both of these names are kind of guys that were roadkill and just had been kind of bottom feeders all season long. And now I think that there's a really, interesting opportunity for those of you that had these players as your wide receiver 3 or 4 on your rosters to potentially get some really strong flex level players. Now, both of these guys are insanely uber talented wide receivers. Really great route running here from Diontae Johnson. I believe that he's one of the more all-around receivers in the game today. And George Pickens is just a physical nightmare, a young and hungry wide receiver. And the thing that has changed for this offense as of late is the quarterback play. Kenny Pickett is finally starting to get comfortable, and you can see it if you watch the Monday night game, which if you didn't watch it, I do not blame you, but he looks poised. He's using his legs. He's moving around in the pocket, not just tucking the ball and running. There is so much growth that I've seen over a short period of time from Pickett that's very, very encouraging here. So, again, I'm not looking at Diontae Johnson like the once upon a time fringe wide receiver 1 to elite level wide receiver 2 in PPR. I'm not even looking at George Pickens as a weekly must-start player. But boy, do these two have a just juicy big old pile of opportunity for their schedule the rest of the way this year. And if Pickett continues to impress, he can deliver really good floor numbers for Diontae Johnson, potentially spike that ceiling up a bit past where it's been in weeks past. And also for George Pickens, we know doesn't necessarily have the best floor in the world, can continue to see his ceiling be elevated here down the stretch. So for these 2 players, they're at Atlanta this week. That is a great matchup. Baltimore, at Carolina, Las Vegas, at Baltimore again, and then Cleveland to end out the season. Cleveland is the toughest matchup, that being the Week 18 game here in terms of the amount of points they've allowed to opposing fantasy football wide receivers. So super optimistic about the way that Diontae can end the season here. George Pickens as well. I think Diontae Johnson, again, is the higher floor asset right now. But for those of you that have just suffered through having these players rostered all year, or maybe you savvily bought one of them for super cheap, I didn't think the situation was going to get better, but the last couple of games, it certainly has looked that way. And if things continue to trend in this direction, I think that there is some hope here for this situation. Last up here, Garrett Wilson. Good old Garrett here, the second wide receiver taken off the board in this year's draft class behind Drake London at the 108 pick. Garrett Wilson is insanely talented. I have preached this all offseason long, and I was very skeptical about his fantasy value for this year in redraft leagues. I just thought it was a really hard case to sell that Zach Wilson was going to deliver him reliable fantasy football numbers here. But man, Mike White has unlocked his potential to be an alpha wide receiver. We saw this last year with Mike White, and now this might be a bit presumptuous of me to assume that Mike will keep the job throughout the rest of the season, but if you look at the schedule, the defensive opponents here are relatively easy to, exploit here. As long as the Jets O-line this week against Minnesota can give Mike White the time to throw the football, he is going to find success yet again in this game. He's got Chicago coming up here. I believe he has the Lions, they just killed Chicago. He's got the Lions coming up here. There is a whole lot of opportunities for Mike White to continue having success down the stretch of the season, and Garrett Wilson is the primary beneficiary of the situation. Now, it was Elijah Moore last season, and Mike White starts going out there and completely balling out. He's now the wide receiver 2 in this offense, and hopefully reasserting himself to have some relevant value for this team. So for Garrett Wilson, it's athleticism, it's movement, it's body control, it's route running. He checks so many freaking boxes here, and Mike White understands the responsibility of getting the ball to your best playmakers. That is his job here. He said after the game, he embodies it on the football field. And like I said, if they go back to Zach Wilson or something happens to Mike White, I'm immediately putting good old Garrett back down on my bench. But there is such a good opportunity to play him in a similar role to Christian Watson as your wide receiver 3 or flex level player to go out there and be a stud contributor down the stretch of this NFL season. So there you guys have it. I appreciate you all for sticking with me throughout today's episode. To recap, Christian Watson, Amari Cooper, JuJu, Diontae Johnson / George Pickens, and Garrett Wilson. 3 rookies in today's episode, 6 names total. A lot of opportunity, upside, and a whole lot of potential for points scored here in the last month or so of this NFL season. So one more time, I appreciate the heck out of you guys for watching today's episode. If you have not checked it out already, we've got a running back segment live today as well. Go check that out. I'll see you there. Peace out.